Some lives are written in whispers, others are carved in screams. Ozzy Osbourne's story is one of survival against storms that would have broken lesser souls. 6 storms, 6 names, each woman leaving her fingerprint on the chaos and beauty that shaped the Prince of Darkness. For Ozzy, they weren't just fellow musicians, they were lifelines. Wrapped in leather, eyeliner, and steel, these women weren't ordinary rock stars. They were survivors, warriors, muses, and sometimes quiet confessors. They didn't just watch the madness. They walked through it, shaping not only his story but the boundaries of what women could be in rock music, and in his final breaths of reflection, Ozzy thanked them, not just for their art, but for keeping pieces of him alive when the world threatened to pull him under. Lita Ford in the fog of addiction and the fire of fame, Lita Ford stood her ground. To Ozzy, she wasn't just another name on a list. She was unforgettable. Their duet, Close My Eyes Forever, wasn't just a hit. It was a confession, a bond forged in loyalty, resilience, and pain. Behind every note were sleepless nights, backstage, arguments, quiet apologies, and moments of healing laughter. Together they screamed, laughed, fought, and created. And when the spotlight grew cruel, Lita didn't flinch. She stared down the chaos of the rock world like she owned it. Ozzy never forgot her strength. That unfiltered connection could never be recreated with anyone else. Patti Smith, for Patti Smith, life was poetry wrapped in spectacle and sound. Her purity wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about refusing to be anything less than herself. Ozzy admired her fiercely. He didn't just revere her, he respected her as a warrior who would battle with or against him without hesitation. She was leather, eyeliner, and cold steel wrapped in words sharp as blades. Patti didn't need theatrics to dominate. In a single sentence, she could remind Ozzy who he was. No pity, no drama, just fire. He once called her the high priestess of punk. When Patti said, "Pull yourself together, man," it hit him harder than any applause ever could. Joan Jett, 1984, backstage in a haze of drugs and darkness, Ozzy crossed paths with Joan Jett. Their lives only intersected briefly, but the moment was burned into his memory. Joan was fire, not just playing with it, but made of it. Her independence wasn't an act. It was who she was. She embodied rebellion not for the boys, but for herself. Her words, "I love rock and roll," weren't just a lyric. To Ozzy, they were a battle cry. She reminded him that music was supposed to be raw, dangerous, and defiant. Joan didn't care about Ozzy's fame, theatrics, or chaos. She met him as an equal. And in that defiance, Ozzy saw something unforgettable. Debbie Harry later, in a chaotic New York after-party, Ozzy met Blondie's Debbie Harry. The night was filled with punk, energy, broken bottles, and laughter sharp enough to sting. Debbie wasn't just a singer to him. She was a warning shot, a force sharp enough to scar memory yet too beautiful to regret. Ozzy called her a punk queen. With one smile, she could command a room. With one cigarette-lit glance, she could silence even the wildest chaos. To Ozzy, Debbie embodied that rare electricity, a rebel queen who could bend the world around her without needing to scream. Ann Wilson from the band Heart. Ann Wilson wasn't just a singer, she was thunder. Her voice was steady, seismic, and rooted in something ancient. Ozzy described her presence as haunting, almost mystical. She didn't need flames or spectacle to capture attention. One breath, one note, and she could hush a stadium. When Ann sang, it was like a spell. To Ozzy, she was the goddess of thunder, admired, respected, and unforgettable. Stevie Nicks, and then came Stevie Nicks. Their paths crossed in the early 80s when Ozzy was teetering on the brink. Backstage, with whiskey dripping into midnight, Stevie found him. She didn't console him with words. She didn't need to. They simply shared the same broken space, trading pieces of themselves like lifelines. Stevie was mystery wrapped in velvet and shadow, a witch-like presence that never left him. Her voice was chilling, unforgettable, wrapping around Ozzy like a ghost. He once said only certain women in rock possessed that kind of magic. For him, Stevie was one of them. Epilogue. By the late 80s, Ozzy was spiraling under the weight of his demons. Yet, in those darkest moments, these 6 women stood out, not as rivals, not as lovers, but as warriors, poets, rebels, and queens who had carved their own place in history. Patti Smith, Joan Jett, Debbie Harry, Ann Wilson, Stevie Nicks, Lita Ford, 6 storms, 6 names. Each left fingerprints on the madness that shaped the world of Ozzy Osbourne. Each reminded him of something rare and sacred, that sometimes the quiet truths and rare voices are stronger than any scream into the abyss. They weren't just women of rock, they were the storm itself.
Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon.